Hey guys, how you doing? This is JP Saricolia coming to you once again with another episode of Age of Heroes. So welcome to this podcast. And today I want to expand a little bit on statue collecting, something that I kind of discussed a little bit yesterday, but in parts. But I want to discuss something that to me is extremely important. And I want to ask this question. Is scale really important? Does scale really matter when you are a statue collector? Because there's always going to be a little bit of controversy in any hobby, in any pastime. There's always controversy in regards to certain things. For the longest time, of course, back in the day when statue collectors started collecting, technically, in this modern statue superhero collecting that actually was started by Bowen Designs. There were other companies doing stuff around that time, but Bowen is recognized as the first one that had the first license, the Marvel license, so started doing Marvel stuff. And of course, that prompted other companies to also come forward and follow that vision that Randy Bowen had with his company. And of course, we now have other different companies, a lot of companies doing statue collectibles and also doing different scales that range from the very small 110 all the way to pretty much half scale, or even larger. So it's always been that, it's always been a really controversy. It's always been divided groups into the statue collecting group. But, you have to realize that every person is different. We all different. So we have different tastes and different likes and dislikes about something. For some people, having 1/4 scale is the thing. They love the 1/4 scale. Some people love the 1/6. Some people go smaller. Some even people love bust, legendary scale, all the large scales. They prefer those. And so everyone is different. There's no real answer or there's no right or wrong in regards to statue collectors or whatever you like. You should collect what you like. That's just first rule of collecting anything. Just collect what really makes you happy. I said that yesterday and I say it again. Collect what makes you happy. Do it because it's a joy. Do it because you have fun with it. If you don't have fun with it, then you shouldn't collect it. If it's not creating fun, it just is a headache, creating more hassle in your life, then you shouldn't be collecting at all. You should just concentrate on those things that make you happy and you're satisfied with. That way you will last a lot longer doing this hobby or any hobby. But yeah, I want to talk about scale because sometimes people make it sound like there's one particular scale that matters more than most. And that's something that I've experienced over the years. Like I mentioned before, perhaps in some of my videos, and perhaps you have heard that before. I started collecting, really, I don't even remember when. It was pretty much in the early 2000s, I think late 90s. I started collecting. I was very young, and I was collecting statues, and very small statues. And that during that time, it was DC, the one that was actually in the market. DC was doing all kind of stuff back in those days. You saw a lot of statues, and also there were other companies that were also doing some statue collectors. Where there was very tiny, very small stuff like around 110. They weren't perfect, they were just okay. You find them at the local comic book stores, a lot of animated stuff. So it was you have Heart Hero, you have all of those companies that were doing some stuff. Some French companies were doing some stuff, but there was nothing major that you can say that was, out there like what we know now. Of course, Bowen started with the Marvel license in the 90s, in the late 90s. And of course, there was a big upheaval, or there was a big like a follow-up. A lot of people were following this because of the buzz, the mini buzz, which was great, and a lot of the statues, the museum post statues. So it was a big time. And then other companies came on board after that. You saw companies like Sideshow that started very small. They started, pumping their stuff and, doing a lot of 1/4 scale stuff. So, a lot of people started loving the 1/4 scale. They love that. And there's always been this group, there's different camps in collecting about those that like larger scale pieces like 1/4, and they consider it to be the biggest thing and most popular thing. And there's this other camp, the people that love the 1/6 scale or anything lower than that, what is considered now the Bowen scale, which is technically at 1/8, 1/7. So, it's always been this different camps in collecting. People, primarily those that started, the early years, those that started before, they started collecting the smaller scale, and they have continued on throughout the years. Those are the ones that have, still collect, many of them, they still collect the same scale because it was the most common one. It was the one that everybody knew. And of course, the 1/4 scale became very popular. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, DC was actually the first one to have some 1/4 scale pieces, with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman and all of that. And of course, Sideshow follow it, with all the different scales. Although Sideshow started with a lot of, started kind of smaller, kind of testing the waters, and they started doing a lot of, dioramas, which were smaller. And from dioramas, they kind of move into the, a lot of 1/4 scale stuff. And actually, they were doing comic kits and all that stuff, and 1/4 scale. And of course, nowadays they're doing bigger scale. So there's a big group that loves Sideshow, and I'm not gonna deny this Sideshow. It's a great company. It is a great company. They produce great stuff, and many other companies also that work around that time. Got Pop Culture Shock, was been in business for quite a while. Also doing a lot of great, 1/4 scale stuff, starting with, in this case, with Street Fighter stuff. And there's so many companies. Now you see XM, you see Kinetic, you see, there's a lot of companies out there producing a lot of stuff. And it's great. To me, I love to see how far this hobby has gone. But there's always going to be this animosity between collectors, between those that make fun or pick fun of others because some people like the smaller scale, or even because some people like the larger scale. And there's always this divided camps. The scale doesn't matter. And sometimes people are going to tell you that they prefer one scale, and you might as well just say that. Some people say, well, they point out the things, what they like. Like, for example, once a scale collector, so smaller, they will tell you that they prefer that because you're able to collect more, which is true. You have a smaller scale, that means that you have more space to share more statues in one single shell, and you can put them all together. And for the most part, all the 1/6 scale have always been, you are able to do a lot of museum poses where you can actually post all together, and also allows you the smaller scale because, of course, the weight allows for a lot of artists to be more creative, so they're able to do a lot of dioramas, action poses, which really gives them a more, it gives them a little extra feel to those pieces. And of course, nowadays, Bowen is no longer there, but Bowen had produced so much stuff out there. But you see companies like Kotobukiya still producing stuff. You have companies like Handmade Objects in Malaysia, and then they was doing some good stuff as well on that scale. You see companies like, you see all Prototype C that is doing actually both. You see companies exploring into that. You see Twitterhead producing a lot of really good 1/6 scale stuff. You see DC producing always on during that scale. So you can see all these companies producing stuff, and the numbers is, we can keep on going. There's so many companies producing the smaller scale pieces, companies everywhere, not only in the U.S., you see companies in Asia, companies in Brazil, Iron Studios, you see companies in France, companies in Europe. So, there's always going to be a market for this scale, Diamond Select, you name it. I have so many companies that I can name today, right now. Some that escape my mind, but all these companies producing stuff for all the different franchises, and I love because they tend to be more accurate than they're closer to the material. It's all about just accuracy, kind of copying the in this case the poses from the TV shows, from the movies, from the comics, from the cartoons. So it's the animation, all of this, it kind of copies that. So it they maintain a level of, I would say, reality. They keep the same level of, they really copy what they do in this source material, which I prefer that. I love anything that resembles the source material. Now, with the 1/4 scale, there's always a tendency to be a little more, not always, but there's a tendency to be a little more artistic in the sense that the art there is more inspired from the source material. So they take inspiration and they kind of run with it and they make it to look a little more realistic. And that's something that Sideshow has done for years. There are not necessarily represents the comic book characters when we're talking about Marvel or any other source material they use. They take inspiration from it and they run with it and they add and they make it look more realistic, which is nothing wrong with it. I like it. I do like it. Sideshow for the longest did produce a lot of stuff that was very, 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 very cool looking, and still does. Everything is so cool looking. So if you want something more realistic, then you go with it. The Star Wars stuff is magnificent. Gentle Giant also did a lot of Marvel stuff, and Gentle Giants, did a lot of minibus, which are some of the best minibus in the market, of course. But they have done a lot of stuff with Star Wars, with all different scales from 1/6 to 1/4. So they have done and play with it. So all these companies have done and play with it, and there's companies, and every company has a signature style. Now, there's always going to be people saying that 1/4, it's a men's game. I heard that before too. And 1/6 is just for kids. So those that cannot afford 1/4. I even hear those comments. So people saying, 1/4 is for the people that have the good collectors, And I'm going to say this with, kind of mocking this because it's just for collectors. 1/6 is for those that cannot afford 1/4. And I heard all these comments, trying to downside what people collect, which is always stupid. It is a stupid comparison. And people that say that for the most part have no understanding of collectibles. Collectibles is not about one single scale. This is not about status. People assume that it's all about status. What status you have because of what you have. I remember, and I can say this going back to what I was saying earlier. I started collecting a smaller scale, but of course, for a while, then I got married and I took a big break from comics and also from, collecting for like around 5 years. So I went back into collecting, I started collecting statues and I started with Sideshow. So I started collecting a lot of 1/4 scale stuff, because I loved it, because it was great. I love the 1/4 scale stuff. I love the style, coming back into after, collecting for, taking a break for 5 years and going back into collectibles. It was great to do something different. And I found this hobby as Sideshow, and I collected a lot of Sideshow stuff for a while. I collected comic cats and I collected, 1/4 scale pieces, premium pieces. And it was fun. However, I started running out of room very soon. It just get to the point where you don't have enough room because you have large pieces. So I make the decision then to really downsize what I had. I was collecting a lot of 1/4 things, and I needed something different. So then I started exploring into going into Bowen, which I already knew. And I started collecting actually Kotobukiya. Kotobukiya was the one that hooked me into the 1/6 scale or the smaller scale. It was Kotobukiya. Eric Sosa stuff was the thing that really got me hooked. And of course I started, getting Eric Sosa stuff. And then I started complementing some of that with Bowen. And the rest is history. I started collecting that and, little by little started moving away from 1/4. And I stopped collecting, and it's been years now when I stopped collecting 1/4. And I got a few pieces here and there, some of the ones that I really wanted, pieces that I care about. But most of the time, it's just a single solo pieces because my collection consisted and has consisted primarily with anything that's smaller because it fits my profile. It fits me well. I like it. Now, people, when you present this, and I remember I used to go to some of the forums like Sideshow Freaks and stuff like that, which I don't frequent anymore. I still go to Statue Forum, which is, I've been, a reviewer there and, have more friends there. But Sideshow Freak was a place where you supposedly, even though the name says Sideshow Freaks and it's all about Sideshow, you can present whatever. So I used to showcase my collections there, and some people were even trying to make fun of it. Some people were trying to make fun because they say, you're the Bowen or Kotobukiya, that's the Pornsmade collection, which I've always found it very stupid and insulting and very, to be honest, not only insulting, but it's really short-sighted because that's not the case for me that I cannot afford the 1/4 scale, which is actually what brought me into it. And sometimes people were saying this, it's because, you have to move up from 1/6 or the smaller scale. You have to graduate from that to 1/4. In my case, it was the opposite. I actually downgraded, or I went down because I realized that my collection was going nowhere just it was limited. And the thing is this, not everyone owns a big home. Not everyone has a big space for collectibles. And the thing is this, not everyone has that around the world. Most people don't around the world. Space is limited in many parts of the world. So in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and all those parts of the world, in Europe, space is limited, even here in the U.S. If you live in New York City, you have limited space. So wherever you live, unless you live in the country, a lot of this, people that have this opinion, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe you're a hick living in the mountains when there you have enough space to, to have a cabin and have a big home. I don't live on those situations. So, but I still am a collector. I'm still find the way to really collect. And the way I do it is just smaller scale. I even have paid top dollar for collectibles that are 1/6 scale more than they cost. Some of my 1/4 stealth cost me. I have to pay because these were grails, pieces that I really wanted. So I put the money on it because I really want it, and some pieces and the ones, small pieces can be very expensive. They can add up in price. You can pay top dollar for these pieces because they are grails. So, but, a lot of times people in the ignorant mind, they just don't understand the concept. They think that you just kind of running with it, and they don't realize that actually every collection has a cost. There are grails in all different scales. So size doesn't really matter as much as people think. And it was something for quite a while. Of course, now that the departure of Bowen designs have really caused this vacuum where a lot of people actually move away from it because there was nothing else to collect. Well, many of the companies were stepping in, and they move into the 1/4 scale, which is a more expensive, not only in the cost of the statues you're buying, but also to maintain. And of course, as you know, Sideshow has become a monopoly in regards to what they what they produce and they collect and the rights that they own, especially in North America, which is the biggest market. So there's always going to be that difficulty for these companies. And of course, companies have exploded in the sense that what they're producing, the amount of product they're selling and what they're selling. XM has been a big factor of it. They produce a high quality product. I'm not denying that. Very high quality, but the price is really high. You get, you're paying top dollar for their product, and it's not their fault. They're giving you a really premium quality, product. But of course, there's always this fight about what's best and what's worse. So there's always this treatment towards people that's collecting a smaller scale as they're inferior to the 1/4 scale, and you're always going to see those comments, and people, they trying to think this is a status thing. If I collect 1/4, then I'm going to be well seen by the community as my collection has more value. And that's not true. I've seen, if you really count top dollar money for money, I've seen some collections, now I'm always been in business in the sense of money. That's my career. I've always handled money, when it comes about, finances and all that stuff. So when I see a collection, sometimes you can compare a collection to another. You can see a 1/4 scale. And I can see right away how much money is invested in it. That's all I see, based on the prices, already have an idea of the price. So I know that if I can see a collection, right here, picture side by side, I can see a 1/4 scale. Let's say somebody that collects 1/4 scale, you can see $20,000 invested in that collection. 20,000. Now, on the other side, I can see a Bowen collection. We're talking about two top photos of two collections. And this Bowen Designs collection, I can see 30,000. Easily 30,000 or more just there. So you can say, well, the 1/4 scale is, fuller. They're both photos. Full collections are really full. But how is it that one is, the 1/4 scale is lesser money than the Bowen scales? But you have to know the amount. You have to know the prices of these pieces. Some of these pieces, they can get up to $800, $1,000 a piece, a pop, just one piece. And, you need to add more in order to fulfill a diorama. So you have a lot there in comparison to there. And of course, it's more time consuming for the Bowen collector or for the 1/6 collector to add more and more because you have to add more while, you occupy with one single piece, in this side. Of course, the person that collects the 1/4 scale might have to add maybe like 4 or 5 pieces a year. That's what he can afford. While the Bowen person has to actually purchase on the same space, have to purchase maybe 10 or 12, 15 pieces. So you see the difference here, is that you triple the amount of what you're doing. So you're adding more and more and more. Of course, this is just numbers. So people don't collect as much, but that gives you an idea. It takes longer to come up with a Bowen scale display than with a Sideshow display. A Sideshow display or, a 1/4 scale or larger, it takes you maybe a year to to come to, to fill in completely 1-2 years. I see collectors, they have a very nice, I'm not saying that it's not, very nice collection in 2 years, and that's it. They're done. They just have to move pieces here and there. Now, a Bowen collection will take you years to complete because of the space limitations too, because you have to add more spaces, and because you're adding in this case based on scale, based on era, no scale, I'm sorry, based on era, based on teams. So it's just more effort that you put into it. Now, I don't want to say this because I'm trying to downsize what Web4 collectors do. Maybe perhaps you're a 1/4 collector. I'm not here to criticize what you do. I have many friends. Everyone collects something different. That's not the point of this video, of this podcast. It's the importance to understand this. The scale doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you choose to collect, whether it's large scale, whether it's small scale, whether it's just plastic, or whether it's polystone, or whether it's stone, whether it's metal, whatever, whether it's bronze. Doesn't matter what you use or what you collect, as long as you're collecting something that you feel comfortable with. And that's what really matters. People are always going to criticize someone because you collect this or you collect that. And they might treat you like, you don't have the money to afford this or that. And that's not necessarily true. You can afford this or you cannot afford that. But are you being smart about what you're doing or what you choose? And that goes back to a rule that perhaps I need to talk about in another podcast. Always let your heart guide you through the process. Don't let the people's opinions, don't let the peer pressure to guide you through the decisions you're making. If you started collecting this because you wanted to go in this direction, then continue on. Just continue on in that path and just follow what you decide to collect from the beginning. Don't let other people dictate that. Now, if you're unsatisfied with what you're doing or the direction you're doing, which happens a lot when you started collecting at the beginning. When you start collecting, you don't have a vision, and that vision comes later sometimes. And then you realize that you don't have a vision and a clear picture of what you want. So then you start getting rid of stuff so you can actually shape what you want. And that's fine. That's okay. And, you're going to make mistakes, but don't let the other people telling you what you need to collect. If 1/4 is out of your price range, then don't collect 1/4. If 1/6 is what you can afford and you love and you like, then go for it. Now, remember, you're going to spend almost the same amount of money regardless of what scale you do. So it's not about just the money. It's about being smart about how you do things and choosing the perfect size for you, for your collection, for your room, for your office, for, for just the little corner that you may have at home where you put all your little statues and your little collectibles, your little space, for your man cave, for whatever you decide that you have the space for, you have to set it up. And I have a video where I talk about these important aspects of collecting, the things that you need to know. And you can watch that on my YouTube channel. But the thing is this, find what really balance you out, what really makes you happy, what really looks well, it fits in your pocket, fits in your profile, fits in your home, and makes you happy. Don't go into something that really you think is going to be better, but it ultimately can be a downside. I see so many people, I met a lot of friends, I don't try to criticize this. And I know some friends that were collecting a lot of 1/6 scale. But of course, when Bowen went out, there was a drought for quite a while, for a couple of years. It's been a drought. So they just gave up. They felt that they were not going anywhere. So they got rid of all their 1/6 scale stuff and they moved into the 1/4 scale. And now they're just going, trying to keep up with the Jones, trying to stay alive in this really rat race. And they're not really happy with it, but they're doing it, because they already got trap on it, and the smart thing to do is when Bowen, the sign just went out. And I can tell you this from my experience. I found that as a relief. I can tell you that because I was purchasing so much stuff from them. I'm from Costa Rica. I got to the point that, I said, you know what? Let's take the break. And, throughout this drought for a while, actually, I found myself enjoying that money that I was not investing into other things. And I realized, wait a minute, this is not bad at all. I can take a break on this and actually gave me the time to sit back and look at my collection and see the things that didn't fit in the collection and they needed to go. And it's been fun because of that. Realizing that the scale is not as important. I could tell you one thing. All my years of collecting, it has been easier for me to get rid of the 1/4 scale pieces than it's been hard, than just getting rid of the 1/6 scale pieces. I feel that the 1/6 scale pieces are harder to get rid of, in my opinion, because I love them. I love them so much in the sense that what the representation, the poses, all of that is just a representation of the comic book stories. While the 1/4 scale, they're more like, a interpretation of it. It has that design, the style, but it's more like an interpretation of it, not necessarily necessarily that I have like a hard attachment because this image represents a comic book cover that I just fell in love with as a kid. So, it's just more like a variation of it, which is good, but I never felt that attachment with those pieces as I did with the, have done with the pieces that like the Kotobukiya or Bowen, that represent an era, like a Jim Lee era or like an 80s era or the 70s era, represent these characters from this, particular covers. So, different folks, different strokes. Everyone is different. But don't think for a minute that the scale will determine, one scale is better than the other. That's not the case. Any scale is good as long as you're happy with what you're doing. If that's what you envision in your life, then you just stay the course and just stick with what you do. And if you decide ultimately to change the path, then just change the path, but not because people are telling you that you need to, or because you feel that that's where you need to go because of the market, the way the market is behaving, because what other people are saying. No, just do it because it's the right thing and you feel it's the right thing for you. So once again, thanks for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate those that take the time to do it. For those that watch my videos, so thank you for doing that. If you're watching this through YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. When you like, it really supports this channel. It makes this channel to pop even more. If you haven't followed me, you find this video, just follow me. I will appreciate your support. Also, if you listen to the podcast, share the podcast, with other friends. Tell your friends, share them on Facebook, share it on Twitter, tell other friends about me, and maybe, we can grow this even more. And if this is in your heart, if you want to support this channel as well, you have the opportunity to do it financially. Anything you support this channel, it really helps out. So check my Patreon account, and whatever you are able to help, I'll be more than grateful. And thank you for that. So once again, God bless you and have a great day. Bye-bye.